Boom! According to that, I am live, and I am slightly out of focus. You know what? I think I was playing with the. Oh, there we go. I'm in focus now. I am in focus now. Just actually, now I'm just thinking, did I change the settings the other day? No, it is working. Okay, that's good. I'm in focus. It's good to see you all. My name is Hiko Simon. This is Tokyo Tonight. I'm here 10:30 p.m. Every Japan Standard Time every Sunday night. It's great to see so many people already in the comments. Hope you're all having a good week. It's been kind of an interesting week. I've got a bunch of topics to talk about tonight, just things that have been going on in Japan this week. Of course, continued craziness in Ukraine. Unfortunately, signs that we might be in for the wave has been coming down very, very slowly with COVID. It looks like it might be going up again. So I'll be talking a bit about all of those sorts of things. But first of all, great to see we've already got 6 people in the 7 people currently viewing. I see 3 likes, but I see some people seeing 4, so that's all good. Do remember to like if you like. I do appreciate it. In the chat already, we have Cobras Tenshi. Great to see your first commenter there, as Will Smith and DJ Jazzy Jeff once saying summer time. Yes, indeed. Let's go, says Aaron. Quentin Rankin says hello to everybody. Ada Void, good morning. Good morning, Arizona. Good to have you in here. We've also got, who else we got in here? Odie Jr., woot, indeed. Bada boom. I like it. I click on the button to go down to catch up, but that's all that there is, it seems. Oh, and there are some more. We've got EDIR, Eater, I guess. Surprisingly, you made it. I'm glad that you made it. We've got John Carlo Lanoy, a Philippines representative. Excellent to have you here as always. We've got Black Tengu from Greece. Indeed, COVID sucks. It does indeed. The dentist and all of that. Milena from Poland. Great to have a Polish representative here as well. Wow, I do love how everybody's rocking in here from all over the world. Please remember, as always, I do just love to just say hello, and actually just for double excitement, it's just cool to mention where you're checking in from. It's just kind of cool to get a sense of where everybody is checking in from. Joe Smith observes I'm wearing a Canterbury Rugby t-shirt. It's kind of funny. It is a New Zealand rugby brand, although New Zealand rugby has become so successful that Nike and Adidas and all of those sort of big global brands have basically bought all the rights to put jerseys on all the best New Zealand teams. So now to get like Canterbury New Zealand rugby gear, you can actually get it more easily in Japan than you can get it in New Zealand. They've got the rights for making all of the rugby wear of non-New Zealand teams. But they are good clothes. I do like them. So thank you for noticing, Joe Smith, and great to see you there in the comments. I've got Tokyo 503, 10 perfect days a year, and fortunately today was one of them indeed, after an Arctic typhoon yesterday. As we typically get, the weather's always very unstable in Japan this time of year. It is the time that the sakura come out, but typically you'll get a warm sunny day that will make the cherry blossoms come out, and then there would be, then when everybody goes out to have a Hanami party, then you get the cold, rainy blast that sort of follows that up. So, yeah, unfortunately, we had that yesterday, but today it was quite nice. I only got out briefly, tried to get out, but ended up being stuck at home today. So hopefully I'll get out during the week. I also, because I got my COVID shot last week, I've not been running the last week, but I'm hoping to get out maybe for some super light runs, and maybe I'll try to shoot some Hanami video this week. We'll see how I go with that. Of course, it's spring vacation. My son graduated elementary school this week. He's attending regular Japanese school. He's going to be going to junior high soon. But yeah, grows up fast. So that was interesting. In New Zealand, I know in America they do graduations, I think at least of high school and stuff, right? In New Zealand, even high school, we never did graduation. We had like a final assembly and there'd be awards and stuff like that, but nothing like this sort of graduation ceremony. The only graduation ceremony really that you have in the education system when I went through it was for university. And for that was scheduled to happen in like March or April or something. And of course, I was starting work at the start of April in Japan. So I figured I'd just skip all of that and go to work in Japan. So I never attended any graduation for myself, actually. So it's kind of cool. It was really like for my son, for his elementary school, it was really full on. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, also, if there's anyone here who was in Tokyo, there of course was the annual YouTube Hanami today in Yoyogi Park. I did not attend. But you know what? I've kind of eased back on being so condemning. You know, the city council did ask people not to do Hanami parties. I think at this point, I get the feeling this whole thing might go on forever. And I do think for people who are, taking informed risks, go ahead. I kind of, I'm not going to condemn other people for having Hanami parties anymore. They know the risk that they're taking. I'm hoping I can attend myself next year. It'd be nice. I'd like to think that one way or another, even if things don't get any better, I'm thinking we'll have to realize at some point either it's going to get better or it's going to stay the same, and people are going to realize we just can't go on forever like this. We can't go into a third year like this. If it gets worse, I mean, who knows? We could very well be still in this situation, but hopefully it'll be in a situation that, I mean, I'm looking forward to doing a meetup at some point, hopefully over the next year. It'll be weird socializing again, actually, like non-virtual socializing. I'm not sure I even remember how to do it, but we'll see. It'd be nice to do a tweet up / YouTube sort of meetup or something like that. But to all the people, I hope you had a good time. If you did go today, I hope you all got your had your shots and whatnot. But I hope that everybody enjoyed that. More people rocking into the comments, by the way. In fact, a lot of people, Carlo, starting with John Carlo Lanoy, correctly using the, you don't have to do the @ mark, by the way, as you can see. You can just put the Hikosaima, just spell my name and it will flash orange, and I will respond to a comment or question or whatever that you've got for me. So if you want to get my attention, do that. How about the Hanami there? Indeed, John Carlo Lanoy asking that. And yeah, today was really the first decent day in Tokyo, and they're pretty much fully out at the moment. We'll probably have a few days. Next week, it will probably be a bit past peak, although then you'll get the blossoms all falling, and that in itself is kind of cool. It'll be over probably within 2 weeks in Tokyo. But today was a good day for Hanami. Hopefully the weather holds on, that it will work next week. More people rocking in. We've got Believe in Yourself, great to see you. How about those Swatch Omega Moon watches, eh? I don't know what you mean. They sound cool. In fact, Swatch Omega, I assume, is that a Swatch Omega brand crossover, or is Omega Moon the name of the Swatch watch? I don't know. I feel like I should check that out. I love my Withings watch, my Activité, my French smart watch that has a charge that like takes 10 minutes to charge and lasts for a month and tracks my pulse when I run. I like it. But I'm curious what Swatch had. My second watch was a Swatch. My first was a Casio, but okay, it sounds like I should check that out. BTW, how old is my son? Well, he's just graduating elementary school. So in Japan, that's you go through 6 years. They start a year later in Japan than they do in a lot of other countries. So he is 12 going on 13. But yeah, Aaron pointing out it snowed in Indiana yesterday, enough to cover the ground. You were shocked. Yeah, we had some snow flurries actually earlier this week. In fact, that was one of the things. We actually had snow this week in Tokyo. And it looked like it was going to cause power blackouts because there was some. I'll talk about this in the topics, but yeah, we had a bit of a. Again, this time of year, it's just kind of all over the place, right? One day it'll be quite hot, and another day it'll be cold. I'm sure in Indiana, snow in Indiana is probably a totally different beast to snow in Tokyo. But yes, indeed. Milchman 2, great to see you there in the comments. Thank you for joining. I see some people giving sheep icons, which as a New Zealander immediately grabs my attention. Indeed, is this the end of March? Where is the lamb you are promised? If there's lamb, invite me. I'm all in. I actually don't get to eat lamb, or even meat very often lately, but lamb is definitely, it's like water when you grow up in New Zealand, at least in my day. Nowadays, New Zealand isn't doing so much lamb, actually. It's kind of, I've heard they've all gone to beef, which is kind of a shame. But yes, nice lamb icon there. And Dave Dentetsu, Snokyo tonight. Indeed, well, we had that during the week. Anyone else rocking in, do please say hello. Remember to like. If you do like, I do appreciate it. It is always much appreciated. Otherwise, let's dive into the topics. Enough of the jibber jabber, enough of the rambling. So, yeah, in terms of what's happening at the moment with COVID in Tokyo, the big couple of things are happening at the moment. First of all, the very gentle decline, remembering that the previous highest peak in Tokyo and all the previous waves, like during Delta, was 5,000 cases a day. Although it's come down a lot from like 20,000 cases or whatever, it still is like at 7,000 cases, and it's going down by like 10% to 20% week over week. Some days it's going down quite a lot, but other days this week it's actually increased week over week. The 7-day average is still a 15% decline. However, it seems to be flattening out. And given that right now we have graduation season and new company starting season and Hanami party season, it seems almost inevitable that there's going to at least be a blip where the numbers are going to rise for a time again. The worst case is that they will actually turn into a new wave, and this is going to be the bottom, which would be terrible if that's the case. But of course, the other factor is that, it now seems that more than half of the cases in Tokyo are actually from the more virulent and nasty BA2 variant of Omicron, what they call Deltacron. So it's more contagious and it causes more severe cases. I don't know. I'm going with a Mr. T theme on this. I know it's a little bit 1980s, but B.A. Baracus, of course, was who Mr. T played in the original A-Team. And there are great gifts to go with that. So I'm going to keep basically using Mr. T gifts to represent my reactions to numbers, particularly if they go up. The AI o tsukata yosoku, our predictions using artificial intelligence, or it could just be somebody called L. If you think about it, if it could actually, be literally owls. It could be someone called Al, and you wouldn't actually be able to tell the difference given the font. It would come out exactly the same. So this is either Al's prediction or AI's prediction, and I don't know. I mean, who do you trust more? Al could be a stand-up guy, but in any case, the boffins who put their trust in the algorithm. I don't know if this is the advertising algorithm. I don't know exactly what sort of AI we're talking about. This could be a Roomba for all that I know, but apparently the prediction is that if people go to Hanami in the normal way, numbers will balloon up from 6,000 to around 13 to 14,000. People think if they basically only do more than 20% more than last year, the yellow line, it will probably climb up to around 8,000, but it'll stay flat, which is what it looks like it's going to be at a minimum. And then if people continue to basically keep at the same level as last year, well, even then the prediction is that it will stop going down. It will stay flat, which in itself is still kind of alarming. I mean, that's through the end of April that you have there on the bottom axis. So this is, by the way, this is from Nagoya Industrial University. So they've got a, unless they have someone, Professor Al, I'm assuming that's the Roomba AI that is predicting that. However, yeah, so, things are, I mean, again, we're all kind of getting desensitized to it, but we have Clubber Lang with Mr. T basically starting to hit us in the face with this new variant, and more people going out. So again, I'm still hopeful that it will continue to decline and improve. The good news about all of this is that at least the government, I think it was to their credit that they decided, and they had to, given the timing, to reopen the country when we were at the peak of the last wave. So even if, things don't really improve, at least we're not waiting for it to bottom out to liberalize travel and stuff like that. So, yeah, that part of it is good. So even if it gets even a little bit worse, it's unlikely to undo at least the opening up benefits. We'll see. Certainly, I don't see us doing another go-to travel campaign unless this just stays flat for a long time. We'll have to see. Indeed, Cobra Stanchi pitying the fuel. There we go. Also in the comments, Aaron, March is supposed to be in like a lion, out like a lamb. Is that what I said? I like I say, if lamb is on the menu, I am all in wherever it is. But yes, a bunch of comments there I don't fully understand. But yes, do I trust Al? He might be a stand-up guy. Well, he might be. I mean, who knows? Great John Simon song with Chevy Chase in the music video. These are too many 1980s references. I'm showing my age. I better move on. Speaking of showing my age. That's me. That's me in 1998 in Kichijoji when I was an English teacher, and basically haven't really changed appearance at all. Practically the same person. That's me when I was 22 years old. I came to Japan a year after that as a 23-year-old in 1999 in March 23. That was this week. That was my Japanniversary, my 23rd Japanniversary. However, I also was 23 at the time that I came to Japan, which means alarmingly, I think if I combine the 3 months that I spent in Japan over our summer break in 1998, and the couple of trips I did, a high school exchange and a backpacking trip before that, all up, I've definitely now crossed that threshold where I have now spent more than half of my life in Japan now. So yeah, that's kind of freaky. I'm 46 now, and I don't, in terms of where that exact middle line is, if you add it all together, I'm definitely now more in Japan. I actually crossed the threshold for the longest, being in Japan longer than anywhere else, a long time ago, because my dad was in the army as a kid. I moved house a lot, like every year. And it means that even though I'm a New Zealander, I think I added it up. My calculation is that I spent about 13 years in New Zealand in total growing up, and about 10 years in Australia. And 2 years in Singapore. I'm not sure if that all adds up properly, in fact, but basically that was all the time I spent overseas. So it only took 13 years for Japan to be the longest. I crossed that 10 years ago. But now it's another threshold where I have now lived, and I've lived my entire post-university working life in Japan. I've never worked anywhere else since 1999. So I realize when I go overseas, the world I know outside of Japan is from last century. And I feel that when I go overseas, when I see prices, when I see trends and so on, I feel a bit like a time traveler at times. But I also now realize that certainly, although your perception of time does speed up, I think as you get older, a year takes forever when you're 7 years old, and it definitely, time definitely flies by as you get older. Even perception-wise, I've clearly now been in Japan most of my life, and I don't know. One thing is certainly when you hit your 30s is you stop being so obsessed with your identity, which I think you are very much as a teenager in particular. I think maybe most of all in your 20s. You stop worrying so much in your 30s, you completely stop giving a crap during your you go through a bit of a midlife crisis, I suppose, at some point. I hear from your 50s, you actually start affirmatively just saying screw you to everybody, but you pretty much stop caring, or at least you get over that hump, and that's where I'm at. So I've never been hung up on the idea. I wouldn't have stayed here if I was hung up on the idea of will they all accept me, will everyone acknowledge my my identity of who I am, but at the same time I have to acknowledge that whether I want to or not, I'm culturally I'm in many ways more Japanese and I've been more influenced by Japan than I have been even my own country. I still wear Canterbury stuff. I support the rugby teams. I eat kiwi fruit. I like chocolate fish, all of that stuff. I even listen to some New Zealand music. I listened to pop charts and actually found some pretty cool tracks on there, which I downloaded the other day. So I like to stay superficially connected, but honestly, I'm definitely more Japanese now. So, somebody. I posted this on Facebook, and some very kind person said, "What happened to your hair?" And I responded on Facebook that, went out for ice cream one day and never came home. It is what it is, right? It's a sad story, but, we move on and deal with it. I had good hair. It was nice having hair, but honestly, I appreciate the aerodynamic nature of the new do. So, 23 years, something to consider. Back into the comments, I see Cobras Tenshi there. EDIR Hiko Simon with hair me with hair is just Brian May from Queen. I could well be. In fact, actually, it's kind of funny. I don't really think of it this way, but when I was playing rugby, again, I do have this thing where I'm so used to seeing Japanese faces now, and I know the old horrible stereotype that Asian people all look the same, and I think that's partly because I learned this working in a souvenir shop. You get trained to recognize faces in certain ways. You'll pay. I think in multicultural countries you do get used to looking at the height and the skin color and the hair color and the eye color. These are the things. In fact, on my old New Zealand passport, which had no driver's license, which had no photograph on it. They didn't introduce photo licenses till after I left New Zealand. I still had a paper license, and it had my handwritten signature on it. It was like a piece of waxed paper, and it had my eye color. And so, and having blue eyes sucked because when I was the drinking age was 20. But so when I was at university and I wanted to go up and buy some alcohol or go up the pub, I was living in a dorm. I had to find someone else with blue eyes to lend me their driver's license. There's no photo on it. I just had to have someone with the same color eyes. But of course, blue eyes are a recessive gene, so it was harder to find someone. In fact, one time I did try getting into a bar with someone with hazel written as the eye color. I have blue eyes, but the bouncer went up and looked me straight in the eyes and was looking at me really close, and I just showed total confidence. I was like, I have brown eyes, and he was like, no, you're not getting in. But yeah, when you're in Japan, of course, everybody has basically, heights are generally similar, hair color. Of course, you have some variation, but generally those features that we use to distinguish people are not very variable among Japanese. However, Japanese, I think, have, you realize when you've been here a long time, have a lot more variation in bone structure in their faces, and you look more at the shape of the face than the color. And it's made me realize that when I look at Caucasians, when I just look at Japanese all the time, you start to realize that we have less variation, I think, in head shape. I think it's less important. So, we have smaller faces with deep set eyes and so on. And I've mistaken foreign friends. I've seen a foreigner and said, oh, g'day. And then it was actually the wrong person. So it totally happens the other way around. But I've had a thing where the Brian May comment, I've been playing rugby, and all my French friends, there was a New Zealand player and a British player in another team, and they said, oh my God, he looks exactly like you. And I must admit, I kind of see it. I kind of see how, I've got a face that, when I was in Spain, when I was doing Spanish, I was in Madrid for a few months at university. And it was true that, out of a crowd in Spain, I would be picked out as like, everyone would assume I was from Britain. I've got a face that does not pass off as local in Spain. No dreams crushed by that, but I know I've got one of those faces. So you could be exactly right there, Cobra Tenshi. DJ Sunny Side Up, awesome to see you. Good to have you there in the chat. Bald lives matter indeed. Yeah, I don't feel like I lost all that much anyway. It's all good, but yeah, great to have you in the chat there. We've also got Shubus, great that you made it. Enjoying your Panamanian coffee, I'm sure, and Mr. Cordy Chep, excellent to have you in here. Shubus, what's here? Haven't seen yours in years. Hey, who needs it, right? Just slows us down. So yeah, the other big story, of course, this week was the power situation. So interesting thing happened on Tuesday. We had, in fact, Tuesday last week, I think I talked about, we had this big earthquake in magnitude 7.3 up in Fukushima. It caused a big earthquake here in Tokyo, not big enough to do damage, but big enough to be scary, to go make you open all the doors. And of course, it triggered a blackout in the middle of the earthquake. And the reason that there was a blackout was that the news sort of explained it quite well. Tokyo gets basically half of its power from a whole bunch of nuclear power stations close to Tokyo, and half of it from a whole bunch of nuclear power stations as well, although they're all offline at the moment. So a whole bunch of power stations up in Tohoku, up in Fukushima and other places, but that are thermal, i.e. they work on burning stuff, which is a nice way of saying coal and oil and petrol and all that kind of stuff. And of course, the earthquake, being a magnitude 7.3 and very large, caused a lot of the running power stations up in Tohoku to just like, all the safeties kicked in and they all went offline. And some of those power stations actually they've not been able to turn them back on. What happened in Tokyo was, although there was still a bunch of power online for Tokyo, because all of a sudden half of the power supply from Tohoku suddenly disappeared, it caused the grid to become unstable and imbalanced. It was all sort of balanced at the right level, but all of a sudden this was missing, and basically the grid, to protect itself, just basically went into a blackout in Tokyo. That's what happened in the middle of the earthquake. But because they have had trouble bringing the Tohoku power stations back online, it also means that they've had a capacity shortage, which is fine this time of year. It's getting warm, but on Tuesday this week, we had snow in Tokyo. We had a really horrible cold snap, so everybody was turning on their heaters all at once. And TEPCO realized, oh my God, we don't have enough supply at the moment with all of these power stations offline. And early on Tuesday morning, They told us that, the forecast for the day is that demand is going to exceed 100% of capacity. And actually it got up to something like 108% demand over capacity. So, and they said that basically if people don't like turn off all the heaters and, everything all at once, then Tokyo is going to go through more blackouts. So, like, we had 2 million homes without power during the earthquake, and they were talking about it being even bigger blackouts, like 5 million homes going offline. Although we went over 100%, even with the attempts to keep things in line, They did not go offline because of the pumped hydro, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the good news is around midday, basically the government said that, okay, we have pumped hydro, we have storage basically, which is going to work for the excess capacity until the evening. But if people don't really take this seriously, all of Tokyo is going to have a power blackout, and it might take ages to come back online this evening. So people did in the afternoon hear that and pay attention, and it came back. And we ended up not having blackouts, thank heavens. But yeah, what saved the day was pumped hydro. And what's cool about pumped hydro is it looks like this. It's a regular dam. But what happens is you really need this. They built a whole bunch of these dams. When they built nuclear power plants, they give a lot of extra. When you overproduce electricity, they give a way to basically, effectively, you can use a dam like a massive battery. And I know it's very, trendy at the moment to, have these sort of Tesla lithium battery farms. And of course, lithium batteries are cool. They're responsive. You turn them, they're instant. They're on and off. They store tons of power. The thing about batteries, though, like batteries, is that they are dirty and expensive to make. They have a limited life. Yeah, both making them and disposing of them is dirty. They're also prone, because they're so energy dense, they're prone to catching fire and so on. That said, they have used them at utility scale in places like South Australia and so on. So it is exciting, but this is not the first solution for storing electricity that's ever happened. The oldest solution is still one of the best. It's been around for like 200 years, which is that whenever you have a power grid is generating more power than it can use, and you don't want it to explode everybody's TVs and computer monitors, they have to try to either turn down the generation, which is hard to do with a nuclear power station, or they have to divert that generation so they can use the electricity somewhere where hopefully it can be stored, basically put it into storing up a battery and then using that power when later on when you don't need so much power. And the way that they do that, the best way to do that is that if you have two lakes, if you have a dam and two lakes, like one at altitude and one at low altitude, you can actually use the excess power to pump water uphill into a reservoir where you can store it. And when you need that power back, because power is offline, you can just let open up some valves and run the water downhill through generators. And it's funny, it's remarkably efficient. It's comparable to batteries, but it's purely mechanical. It doesn't require any lithium or rare metals or anything like that. It doesn't require disposal. It's basically can last almost forever. And it works at the scale of electricity that you need for cities like Tokyo. So Tokyo is surrounded by these dams that have this pumped hydro, this sort of pumped water mechanism, where when there's excess power generation, they can store this up. It's also wonderful for renewable energy. The problem with renewable energy, of course, is that clouds and gusts of wind and so on can affect the stability of the power being generated. So the idea is, of course, you want to be using less than what they're generating and having the excess up and down stuff all going as needed to pumping into dams and so on like this, so that when it becomes cloudy and the wind dies, you can actually just let the water go and generate water again. So Tokyo, because of its nuclear power, apparently it built a bunch of this, but it's also helpful for renewables. But in the case of this blackout, it actually saved the day, because when we didn't have enough power generation, they used the pump hydro to basically get through the day. It's a good reminder that this is something, dams have their own problems, but it's another great solution for having more environmentally friendly power and for getting through things like these blackouts. Also shows how dependent Japan remains on coal and thermal power generation, which isn't great. And while I'm not obviously 100% comfortable with nuclear power, we've had some nasty accidents. From a climate change perspective and everything else, I do still think that Japan should be with safety and with all the improvements that have been taken from the lessons from the Great East Japan tsunami and earthquake that have been applied to all the nuclear power plants, which is still 10 years later, 12 years later, going through upgrades to achieve. When they get those back online, it will be good to have nuclear power back online. But that was pretty cool, actually. The fundamental problem, of course, is Tokyo having a few power plants knocked offline in Tohoku. How did that cause blackouts in Tokyo? Why didn't they just get energy from Osaka or from other big cities that have plenty of electricity? What was the problem? And the problem is this. I talk about this a lot. There's actually two layers of problems. In America, some people know about the problem that Texas had, that there was a big winter storm, and Texas itself decided to have its own separate grid, which is basically unregulated. It's not connected to the rest of America, and when they had basically unusual surges in demand, which they couldn't meet, apart from people being made broke by the cost of energy going up 100 times on their bills, other people, of course, they had all these blackouts. The power grid failed. And people pointed out the thing about power grids is that essentially the bigger the power grid is, the more it can absorb variations and surges and stuff like that. So this is what they do in Europe. It's actually, all the countries in Europe, well, they talk about how France is like nearly 100% nuclear. No country can be 100% nuclear. You can only have about 20% nuclear, but basically France can be that because its nuclear all goes into the pan-European grid where it's all sort of balanced out. It's why Denmark can have 100% renewables. You can only have about 5%, wind on any power grid, but it's all on the same power grid as France. It all feeds into this big thing. And even if there's a power surge in Poland one day, it can be that surge is a big deal if it's in a really small pond. It's like a really big wave in a small pond if it's only Poland. But if it's sharing if it's like in an ocean being shared with the UK and Spain and Greece and Italy and so on, it means that the grid overall is a lot more stable and you can share power and distribute it where you need it. Japan, however, is of course smaller, or about the same size as the UK, same size as California, much smaller than Texas, and yet Japan has 8 separate power grids. And those power grids are connected. They have interconnection points, but you can sort of count them here. The power grid that Tokyo is on, the yellow one, has like 2 or 3 connection points with the orange Tohoku grid, and you've got this big red line in the middle of the country, and this is another problem. So apart from the fact that you can see how they have these lines interconnecting the different colored areas, which are like bottlenecks through which only certain amounts of electricity can go. They can't just let it flow like it's on the same power grid. The other big problem is that you have 50 hertz versus 60 hertz. The story behind this is that back in the Meiji period, when the first electricity generators were brought to Japan, I believe that the Osaka, the first 2 power generators that came to Japan, I could have this backwards, but I believe the first Osakan one was from America. And the American power generator that they used generated 110 volts, which was distributed across the power lines at 60 hertz, while the first power generator that was brought to Tokyo was brought from Europe, and it used the same 110 volts, but it distributed at 50 hertz. And the result of this is that the power grids on the right-hand side of the line are incompatible with the left-hand side of the line. So there are only a couple of connection points, and they have these massive transforming stations. It's literally like having a big power converter that changes the power. This variance in hertz means that if you have, although the voltage is the same, if you're using a small appliance like a hairdryer from Tokyo in Osaka, I think it goes that basically your hairdryer from Tokyo in Osaka is prone to exploding and catching fire, and your Osaka hairdryer in Tokyo is prone to like not drying your hair. Not that I worry about hairdryers very much myself anymore, but yeah, it's kind of funny. This is a situation where it would be helpful if Japan were connected like to mainland Asia, to China or Korea, or even North Korea, where it could have, basically, if it was connected to a bigger grid, it could go and install way more renewable energy. You wouldn't have these risks of blackouts. But even within the country, they have 8 different power grids, which, apart from a few bottleneck connection points, and this is just a legacy of bringing in these 2 power grids, these 2 power generators 150 years ago, and thinking, yeah, sooner or later we'll have to sort out that problem, but for now we'll just let the power. Right now, Tokyo and Osaka are so far away, they'll just develop power grids separately, and one day they'll invest in it. The problem, of course, now is that to fix that, to actually unify this power grid, would cost like $1 trillion. And no one's motivated to do it. Everyone's trying to figure out other solutions, but it's a massive problem for Japan, and that is why in Tokyo, you have a big earthquake in Fukushima, and it can result in 2 million homes without power, like we had in Tokyo, and it's absolutely ridiculous. It's not just ridiculous for the fact it's based on a 150-year-old technological problem that the government's just not had the gumption to face up to and spend money on, but it's also that it limits the ability to, it's like, for example, there's a ton of wind power capacity in the north of Japan and Hokkaido, but no one lives in there. And so basically, when you normally have, when I said before, you can only have 5% of the power on a power grid, basically. I mean, now they're increasing it through things like storage and other sort of clever tricks, but basically, because of the instability of wind, you can only ever have up to 5%. But if it was 5% for all of Japan, that would still be a big number. And, you know, you could have Hokkaido be nothing but windmills supplying the rest of Japan. But the problem is Hokkaido's got like 2 lines that connect it to mainland Japan, which they can't, you know, basically it doesn't operate like part of the same grid. So it means that what you have is 5%, not of all of Japan. You have 5% of Hokkaido's power supply. And they have like 4 million people. So it means that, you know, Japan could be using heaps more renewable green power, but this crazy grid infrastructure means that it won't work. So, you know, it's something I ranted about when I was doing renewable energy policy consulting many, many years ago, in policies that were going to the Japanese government. This was like the biggest problem. And what they would say is that, you know, that one of the best solutions for this, given Japan's problems with its incompatible grids, if they're not going to fix the grids, is to do this, to install lots of pumped hydro, not batteries, but actually, pumped hydro. My video on my streaming thing has frozen. I am wondering, yeah, it's frozen on, it's frozen on there too. Let me see if I can revive that. Let me turn it off and turn it on again. Do all the things. As you all know, it wouldn't be Tokyo Tonight if there wasn't a technical issue. That's annoying. I turned it off and I turned it on again and it is not working. So, what do I do? I could plug in a USB camera. Install that on the fly. Whoops, that's not the right plug. Where is my USB camera? Now that is super annoying. Give me a moment. Let me see if I can fix this. Okay. Let me grab this thing. It's not a bug, it's a feature. You know how it works. That is so annoying. Give me a moment here. How is that connected? Is that it? Oh. Okay, I am now breaking all the things. Now I've lost my monitor. Give me a moment here. Okay, well, I've got my monitor back, but I don't have my camera back. Give me one moment to think. I've not got a spare USB camera somewhere here. where it is. Okay, now I've got my USB camera. Cable stuck. Sorry, bear with me here. Oh, USB. Okay. Let's see, can I get this back? Okay, let's add my USB camera, video capture device, add source, add a new source, so USB, add source, and let's go live cam. It is not detecting my live cam. Why not? It's showing yellow. It's showing the right color up here. Oh, this is killing me. Hang on a sec. Why will it not let me do that? Give me a moment. Add source. Live cam. So my PC seems to have completely given up on video. I'm going to try for one more minute, and if this fails, then I am going to go back to, then I guess I'll just make this an audio show, which would be a shame. Oh, maybe it'll help. Give me one more try at this. Oh, how was that working? Okay, I seem to have got my regular camera working again. What's happened with that? Oh, this is live as well. Okay, so that froze in a weird way. Right, well I guess you can see this on the fly. Give me a moment. Let me boom. Go. Boom. Okay. Boom. Let's just put this here. I guess that's pretty much good enough. I will, if I make that a little bit narrower, I can make this bigger. I think you can all see me now, right? Oh, what a disaster. Okay, anyway, I'm back. Hey. Guess I won't need this after all. I did go and find it and plug it in, but I couldn't get it to detect. Anyway, let's just keep going. In fact, let's go into the into the comments. That was some unintentional entertainment. What else have we got in here? We've got wow, so many comments. Yeah, Quinn Rankett asking, is this just the Eastern Japan power grid? Where does Japan get coal now? It imports it like from everywhere. I think it gets a lot of it from China and Australia actually. And yeah, it's not just East Japan. There are 8 power grids in Japan: Hokkaido, Tohoku, Kanto, Okinawa, Shikoku, Kyushu. Yeah, there's a whole bunch. It's just crazy that Japan has 8 power grids. It's actually crazier than the US system, or at least Texas. So yeah, there they all are. Aaron, but for dams, are they also susceptible to damage from earthquakes? Yes, they are. But believe me, if you if you have a problem from an earthquake destroying a dam, you have bigger problems than an earthquake. Quinn Rankin, how many megawatt hours do all those dams store? It depends, but they can store a ton. But you know, it lasts for a day. So you know, well, that was what we were facing in Tokyo anyway. But they are great. They're just like a big mechanical form of a battery. It's pretty awesome. PB, indeed, gravity batteries are indeed awesome. Catching up, Quinn Rankin, connected to a larger grid. I think for a while, countries will be looking for energy independence. Yeah, you'd be surprised though. It actually, power grids are something that make a lot of sense. In fact, there's a lot of talk about connecting Europe to Africa from this basis, apart from the fact that you could generate renewables in Africa. Bigger is better in terms of power grids. It offers more stability. It's basically like having, you know, an ocean or a swimming pool. You have less risks. You know, energy independence in terms of generation sources, sure, but you know, yeah, that's an interesting one. Calm 9, Ukraine and Moldova aligned with the European 50 hertz network last week for obvious energy security reasons. I wonder why the costs of realignment are so high in Japan. It's just that the infrastructure, once you commit, well, actually, that's a good point. Calm 9, thank you for sharing that. I don't know, but basically it's all based on this very, very outdated infrastructure. And apparently all the transformer stations, everything is wired for 50 hertz, and replacing either all of the 60 hertz or all of the 50 hertz stuff apparently is a big deal. I don't know if it was that dramatic a change in Europe, but yeah. Oh, I see. So in Europe, Cobra extension, this might be it. Maybe in Europe, everything, the infrastructure is built for more flexibility. That could be it, perhaps. PB, when I was consulting on renewables, did the topic of constructing gravity batteries ever come up? Yes, it did. Well, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the actual big concrete gravity batteries. Those are cool. I was a policy consultant on this between 2002 and 2006. In that time, what the Japanese government does is that they pay these think tanks to go and research laws that when they're thinking about doing like a renewable energy feed-in tariff law, they'll ask you to go and look at the best practices in other legal systems. And do a report summarizing what works, what doesn't work, and what's good for Japan and wouldn't be good for Japan. So I was actually assigned to studying like Denmark, California. Texas actually has one of the best renewable energy systems in the world. You know, that isolated grid was actually used for that, and we researched that. So we just look at certain countries, and you know, but pumped hydro was seen as something that was essential for this. Gravity batteries are cool, but they're not actually in widespread use at the moment. And again, you can still get much, you know, again, a big concrete block is cool. It's cool technology, but again, you can do a lot more lifting with a dam than you can with a big concrete block, although it's very cool tech. Hope I'm not. Ben Duncan, good to see you, Ben Duncan, as well as 73 Elephants. Very, very good to see you there. Hope I'm not skipping over people. It's great to see people, of course, all commenting. I am building an Iron Man suit. Yes, indeed. I think everybody was probably enjoying the chaos that I had, the tech issues. Did I try pulling the plug on my USB camera and plugging it back in? You know, I could have done that. For whatever reason, that thing just froze, but this seems to be working just the same. So I'll come back and check this out next week, what went wrong with it. But it's working now, so yeah. Anyway. 10 minutes left. That was a disaster. Let's speed up now and get through the other stories that we have. There are some other stories, including Zelensky spoke to the Japanese parliament. First time ever a foreign leader spoken to Japanese Diet before, and it was by a video link. There were rumors that they were going to have to install an enormous fax machine, and in the end they actually had a conference room where they did the teleconference. Given that, you know, every time you know, he spoke to a country, I mean, you can sort of see his TV actor roots. He was basically doing speeches to sort of try to inspire, you know, people to get fired up and send him guns and money and so on. You know, in America he cited Pearl Harbor, and everyone in Japan going, hey, why Pearl Harbor? But you're always going to offend somebody. I mean, you know, citing the Battle of Britain to Britain, they were wondering what was he going to cite to Japan. You know, some people saying, is he going to cite, you know, Japan getting nuked, or is he going to cite the black ships, or is he going to cite the Mongolian invasions and the kamikaze, the divine wind that saved Japan? At the end of the day, he did cite the sort of fear of nuclear war and so on, but it was a bit more toned down with Japan. Of course, he's got huge support here. Again, horrible and still kind of fascinating to see what's happening with that war. Not only, by the way, I mean, look, Japan has territorial disputes with China, South Korea, North Korea, and Russia, all of its neighbors pretty much. And only in one of those cases does Japan actually occupy the territory that's in dispute, the one with China. And in that case, Japan's actually remarkably, again, maybe I'm biased, but I think that Japan are being pretty good. They want to have good relations with China, so to not inflame the situation, they actually have a rule that no one is allowed to land on the Senkaku Islands. No one's allowed to do anything to provoke China or anything. They're just going to say, they're going to shelve the issue by not doing anything to provoke the other side. China, of course, did try to undo that because, of course, Japan does still exercise control over the islands, and that was shown when some rogue, drunk Chinese fishermen tried landing on the islands. The Japanese Coast Guard put a whole bunch of Coast Guard officials on the islands and arrested and detained the fishermen, which caused a huge problem with China when this happened a few years ago. And, the Chinese hailed the fisherman when he was returned to Japan as a hero. But then he was put into jail and he had his boat taken away, because essentially what happened was, while it was kind of intended as a drunken show of Chinese sovereignty over the islands, it actually did the opposite. It proved that Japan has control over the islands. And it forced China to feel like they have to do something to actually now assert that they have some sort of sovereignty, which is why they've been running patrols around the Senkaku Islands ever since. But even then, Japan, the Tokyo governor, nationalist governor of Tokyo, said Japan should do what Russia does with the northern territories and what Korea does with Takeshima. They should just fortify, drop a battalion on those islands, just dig in and make it so that everyone understands that these are never going back to China, the same way that everyone understands that Takeshima is never going back to Japan. However, Japan hasn't done that, so Japan is quite restrained. However, Russia, of course, being aware that it's taking a lot of its forces, not all of its forces, but a lot of its forces for Ukraine, it has basically, obviously there's some internal concern that maybe Japan might invade the northern territories and try to take those islands back. And so they did a kind of a show of force, inverted commas. They sent a barge with like 20 like rusty Russian trucks through a strait in Japan, like in a show of force, which kind of had everyone in Japan kind of laughing at them a little bit, like, seriously, go to bed, Dad, you're drunk, kind of a thing, to the Russian army. And now they've started doing like missile training exercises on the occupied Japanese islands that Russia's occupied, that are on the NHK weather news like every day. Every textbook in Japan, every weather map in Japan has those Russian islands that have a bunch of Russian people that live on them in homes and in buildings that still are owned by Japanese people. They are occupied territories, like other occupied territories in other parts of the world. It's kind of a tradition for Russia to occupy little bits of the countries around them, including Japan. And Japan just kind of doesn't really care about it too much, although the residents of those islands do live within sight of those islands in Hokkaido, and they've had visa-free travel and so on. However, with Japan sort of supporting Zelensky so much and Ukraine so much, Russia did say that they cancelled peace negotiation talks, which included talks over the status of those islands and handing them back. And I've frozen again. What's happening with my video tonight? Forget about it. I've got a few minutes. I'm going to just keep going through, although that's a terrible moment to freeze. I don't know. What's worse? I should have just said cheese or something. That would have been perfect. So yeah, anyway, so Japan has basically, although Russia's tossed out the idea of peace negotiations, and that's all fine. I mean, they've been going on for 70 years and not going anywhere anyway. And at times Russia would often say, Japan should just let go of the islands because we stole them fair and square, which is how things sort of go in Russia. In fact, I always like to joke that for Japan, the peace negotiations were about negotiating the return of the islands, and for Russia, the peace negotiations were about not taking the rest of Hokkaido. And Russia seems to have taken a step further forward on that, doing missile drills basically on occupied Japanese territory off Japan. But again, they're just trying to show off that they, can still fight like they did in 1902, was it? Or 1904, when they got their asses kicked by Japan. First time ever an Asian power defeated a European power was, of course, when they picked a fight with Japan. So, they probably shouldn't do that. In the meantime, of course, North Korea probably paying attention to what's happening in Ukraine as well from a different perspective. They're afraid that America wants regime change, obviously in North Korea, and they've been trying to build their defense, which I kind of have some sympathy to the view of North Korea that having nukes and having ICBMs basically a credible deterrent where they could inflict pain on America if it decided to, do Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein type regime change type thing. Basically them having nukes and ICBMs is going to stop America from thinking that's something it can do, like invading Panama or Grenada or Libya or Iraq, for example. And from that perspective, it's actually kind of rational that North Korea would be ignoring the world to develop at least a credible security deterrent. And if it was purely for defense, then I would actually be like, yeah, who really gives a crap? Let them build their missiles. There's nothing we can do about it anyway. Of course, the problem is that North Korea still periodically attacks its neighbors. They attack, specifically South Korea. They still fire artillery across the line. They've sunk ships. They fired artillery across the border and killed a bunch of civilians. They even shot up South Korean tourists who went to a tourist resort. They wandered outside of the line on a beach and the guards just shot them. So there is this concern, of course, and the history that North Korea has of having digging tunnels and having hundreds of troops go in and try to assassinate the entire South Korean cabinet, which they also did in Myanmar way back in the day. So you could look at it that, basically having the ability to deter the US would encourage them to go and try to reunify with the South or invade the South and be safe from retaliation against the US. And so on the one hand, you could look at this as that they're doing this for defense. They're just afraid of the US and this is, they're not doing this to hurt anybody. But then you remember all the crazy stuff that North Korea has done and continues to do. And you realize that, they could be doing this as a way to make it easier for them to invade South Korea, in which case you should worry. Still, in a what looked like a remake of Gangnam Style, the Japanese media take was that this guy looked like Psy from Gangnam Style. He did go and, of course, there was this meme-ish, Hollywoodish style fanfare around the launch of the Mars 17 rocket. Cool name, by the way. They call it the Hwasong or whatever in South Korea. But it's Mars. Call it the Mars rocket. Multiple nuclear warheads. Pretty much the only place in the world that's safe is like Paraguay in terms of range. It'd be, if they were launching like satellites, it'd be kind of cool. Unfortunately, they actually fired at 6,000 kilometers up. It's impressive technologically. It'd be excusable if it was just for defense, but given that they might use this to actually invade South Korea, that kind of sucks. Two other stories. I've only got two more this week. One is that the Keidanren, the main enterprise business group, the large big company business group in Japan, released a paper that they want the Japanese government to support startups and to develop, unicorn companies, startup companies that achieve $10 billion revenue. However, remember, this is the big business lobby in Japan, is lobbying for Japan to be able to develop like Facebooks and so on. The reason that Japan doesn't develop Facebooks and Googles and so on is that Japan is so controlled by big business and by the Keidanren, which works arm in arm with the government to set a whole business culture that makes it difficult for small businesses to get capital, to get loans. There's a whole, the fact that all of the advertising is locked up by Dentsu, the fact that the government basically caters all regulations to favor big companies over small companies. And that Japan has an entrenched culture that sort of is averse to the risk-taking associated with starting up small companies. People do it, but the reason that you don't have Facebook start up in Japan is because everything is so geared towards supporting big companies making money rather than small companies. Yet the Keidanren said that they want Japan to be able to develop startup unicorn IT companies that can compete with big US IT companies. And their solution that they're proposing to be able to develop Facebooks in Japan is to basically have a government ministry set up, a big sort of centralized plan for funding and developing companies that can compete against big US IT tech companies, which, you know what that means. That means that these big companies basically are afraid of having to compete with big tech companies that grew up from startups, and they want to create their own spin-offs that they develop and support from big companies and have the government support those, which is the exact opposite of how America got such big, successful unicorn companies. So again, it just kind of shows that the approach in Japan to recognizing how these things came about in the US the understanding is kind of ass backwards. And the fact that the Keidanren is promoting it, I mean, it's basically like Ford saying that, we're going to create a startup or something like that, or, and it could work, it could be successful, but it's not going to be the same thing as what you have in Silicon Valley. Final thing is the Osaka Expo. In fact, what is the expo? Which year is it? it's like for 2026 or something like that. But the upcoming, right now there is a Dubai World Expo. The next World Expo will be in Osaka. They've decided on their mascot, and it's apparently going to be multiple. Originally, it just started up with the googly kind of thing at the top. The googly eye sort of coronavirus was the original design. However, they've decided to attach it to a bunch of designs. And, while people were sort of saying, oh my God, this is like horrific, like with somebody on acid when they did this, I saw lots of people bad-mouthing the Osaka Expo mascot. I have to say, I like it. There are so many, you think about with the last Olympics, there are so many boring, every mascot kind of looks the same. There's this formula for big eyes and sort of big head and small body, and the sort of formula for making a cute mascot. And Japan has a lot of mascots and a lot of cute mascots, but getting one to stand out is kind of hard. And, I think kudos to Osaka. They've gone and made something I think is kind of cute and kind of like, it's kind of cool that it looks horrific and cute at the same time. I mean, so I think good on you, Osaka. I love this. It's perfect given the age that it looks like it's some sort of a weird virus. Maybe this is what we're all going to look like by the time we get to the Osaka Expo. So I'm a fan. I think that this design is awesome, and I endorse it personally, even if everybody else in the world hates it. It's funny though. When I said that, some other people, it turns out, sort of came out of the closet agreeing that, maybe it's not the worst mascot design ever. I think it's kind of cool. I'm much more, I can barely even remember the Tokyo mascots. That's all the topics that I had tonight. We're 5 minutes over, although I lost about 10 minutes for blind searching for. I'll try to figure out what went wrong with the cameras tonight. That's not cool. But anyway, final run through the comments. People who said my name. By the way, I didn't mention as well, I was going so rapidly through the Ukrainian stuff, kind of very disturbing to hear that Russia is actually deporting civilians, particularly from Mariupol, but also civilian refugees that have been at times taken into Russia, put through filtration camps. The stories are coming from the Ukrainian government at the moment, and I haven't seen verification of this, that they are basically taking these Ukrainian refugees and they are taking away their passports and shipping them to the Far East, to Siberia and to places like Sakhalin Island, just north of Japan, which is what they did during the deliberate ethnic cleansing of Ukraine after World War II, when Stalin basically was looking to punish whole ethnic groups that were not seen as being loyal. And basically it looks like Putin's doing the same thing with civilian refugees. I mean, if true, he's one-upping Stalin. Again, I can't think in this day and age that it's possible to hide that if that's happening. Like, there should be Ukrainian refugees in Sakhalin saying, hi, I'm a Ukrainian refugee in Sakhalin and I'm told I'm not allowed to leave the country for 2 years. They're just going to get a mobile phone and get on, get on a VPN, and they can let word out about that. So I guess we'll validate that soon. But kind of crazy again that, they're actually sending people out to the Far East. Those occupied Japanese Northern Territory islands as well were colonized by people who were deported from the far west of Russia for seen as being ethnically not loyal to Russia. It's just insane it's happening in this day and age, but it is. So anyway, final walkthrough of the comments. Building an Iron Man suit, indeed. Did I try plugging it in again? I did. Dan H, good to see you, Dan H. What did press talk about Kishida's recent trip to India? I didn't see much chat about it, actually. The Quad thing still strikes me as a lot of hype among 4 countries that, really probably, particularly India, can't really get on the same page, but hopefully that will change. We'll see. But of course, India's welcome to do its thing. Shinjuku, Gochome, and Taiwan, of course, has a claim on the Senkaku Islands. Good point, Shinjuku, Gochome. Good to have you in here. Kubra Stingy, I bet the weather news for those Russian-occupied islands are just for the evil hideout of Rami Malek. I have no idea what that means, but certainly they can check the weather on NHK, which I'm sure they can see. Am I frozen? No, I am warm, the J-Vlog, but thank you for letting me know. Another hentai ad banner. Oh yeah, that happens for some of the pages. Yeah, let it go indeed. One Johnson, good to see you. Lots of potential concerns all over the place. What do I think is Japan's highest most likely risk from abroad? I think it's China. I think it's that they're sort of creeping, incremental grabbing of territory. The fact that, China's been happy to get into even shooting wars with Vietnam and Philippines over the South China Sea. I think it's inevitable that they're going to just move in eventually and take the Senkaku Islands. And Japan's not even really trying to stop them that much. They're just trying to match them at the moment. To me, that's the inevitable one. And actually, and over Taiwan is another realistic scenario. I still find it hard to believe that there's any benefit for Russia in doing, trying to attack Japan more than it already sort of has. So I don't think that's really a concern. Interestingly, if the Koreas ever reunite, there are a lot of people in South Korea who think Japan would instantly become the number one enemy, which I think is disturbing and wrong. And I don't think Japan would be particularly afraid or care. I mean, most people in Japan really try to pretend that South Korea is like where Iceland is or something, but China is a concern. Hopefully nothing will ever happen with that, but again, if they just get the wrong, they're an authoritarian country, so if they ever get the wrong leader, if they get a Putin type person, it could happen, which is disturbing. So Kerberos Tenchi, big chance. Let Hiko Simon review them next week. I'll review whatever you want me to review. I'm all good with that. Auntie Liana in Yokohama, good to have you in here. As well as other people, if I haven't said hello to you. Kerberos Tenchi, those Mascots look like a mix of Ultraman monster and Parasite. Yes, indeed. I think they look awesome. EDIR, you remember the mascot from your nightmares? If you remember the mascot from your nightmares, is it a successful design? I say yes. Quint Rankett, have you been listening to Putin? The language he uses suggests ethnic cleansing. He does indeed, and I heard Biden say tonight that he's all for regime change in Russia, followed by which the White House had to say, we are not in favor of regime change, but that's what he was saying. But I mean, look, Putin's claiming that in Donbass, that Ukraine was engaging in ethnic cleansing, and that's the justification. But it's the justification they used in Transnistria. It's the justification that they used in Ossetia, in Abkhazia, and this is what he's doing. He's basically justifying undermining the sovereignty of former Soviet countries by using the Russian minorities in those countries, saying even in Estonia, they're saying that, for example, by minimizing Russian language, that's a form of genocide, and it's BS. I mean, frankly, the conflict had been frozen in Ukraine. It was for his own convenience that he did that, but certainly I've seen the Putin basically speaking up, talking up the ethnic cleansing aspects going the other way against Russians there. That's what he's saying about the whole. I mean, his whole thing is the whole world's out to get him, and that justifies doing crazy stuff to him. He shouldn't be invading Ukraine. The J-Vlog, you were told that 600,000 Japanese were taken from the Northern Islands by Russia. I don't think, well, you know what, I think that there were about 600,000 people who were detained, but they weren't all from the islands. There were a lot that were in Siberia that were actually Japanese military. I think the population of those islands was something like 10,000 or 20,000. They were all taken and put into gulags for a long time, but there were a lot of Manchurian soldiers that were detained by the Red Army, and they were also put in camps for a long time, and probably in numbers like that. Kerberos Tenchi, if I watch James Bond, No Time to Die, I'll understand the Rami Malek reference. I should check that. I'm all caught up on comments. Thank you for keeping me company tonight. We're 10 minutes over. I look terrible on the video, but hell, I look terrible on the video normally anyway. Thank you for keeping me company. If you enjoy the topics, I do appreciate a like. I do love having you come and join me every week. And please stay safe, as always. The Rona's building up again. Do enjoy the Hanami if you're in a part of the world that has cherry blossoms. Stay safe, and I'll be back here next week because I've got nothing better to do. Have a good week, everybody, and peace. Stay safe. I'm doing a peace mark at the camera, even though you cannot see it right now. Have a good week, everyone. Stay safe. Bye. Boom. I'm going to end the stream. Technical issues. It's a feature, not a bug. Peace.